So President Trump is saying, listen, I love the tariffs. Nothing can make me remove the tariffs. Nothing. Okay. And then we found out on Monday morning, after the markets immediately dipped at open because they thought maybe these tariffs were permanent, that they were anything but permanent. In fact, President Trump was able to leverage major concessions out of the Mexican government. According to President Trump's Truth Social feed, quote, I just spoke with President Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico. It was a very friendly conversation wherein she agreed to immediately supply 10,000 Mexican soldiers on the border separating Mexico and the United States. These soldiers will be specifically designated to stop the flow of fentanyl and illegal migrants into our country. We further agreed to immediately pause the anticipated tariffs for a 1-month period, during which we will have negotiations headed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent, and Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick, and high-level representatives of Mexico. I look forward to participating in those negotiations with President Sheinbaum as we attempt to achieve a deal between our two countries. So remember, President Trump had used his emergency authority to stop fentanyl, illegal immigration, in order to make the tariffs happen. And he's now saying that because Mexico is alleviating the emergency, presumably, this is going to be delayed by a month, so a new trade deal can be negotiated. So it was all leverage. So it was not, in fact, a sort of overall love for tariffs. As President Trump saying he likes tariffs overall in order to gain leverage. Meanwhile, he is now starting to make clear exactly what he wants from Canada. He said, quote, Canada doesn't even allow U.S. banks to open or do business there. What's that all about? Many such things, but it's also a drug war. Hundreds of thousands of people have died in the United States from drugs pouring through the borders of Mexico and Canada. Just spoke to Justin Trudeau. We'll be speaking to him again at 3 p.m. Now, presumably, there are other concessions that the Canadians could make that would mean that the tariffs end up being relieved with regard to Canada. Okay, which, again, all of that is good and fine. Using tariffs as a form of leverage is something President Trump is very good about. He's very good at it. As overall policy, it should be noted, by the way, tariff policy, trade wars are bad and not easy to win. Okay, trade wars tend to impoverish people. Trade wars tend to impoverish the American consumer in particular. Here, for example, is a map of what happens with just the auto parts in your car if a trade war were actually to take place. Okay, this is a map of a capacitor's journey through North America. A Michigan circuit board manufacturer buys a capacitor for a company in Colorado, which imported it from Asia. Let's say it came from China. That's a 10% tariff. It goes down to Ciudad Juarez in Mexico, where it's inserted in a circuit board. When it comes back up through the board, it's another 25% tariff. Then, when it goes to Canada, it'd be inserted into a seat, for example. That is another 25% tariff when it comes back down. So you're talking at that point about an aggregated 60% tariff on the product, right? These sorts of things have a major impact on American markets, which is why you saw the stock market take a dump at the very beginning of the day when it looked as though Trump was in principled fashion pushing tariff policy as sort of a net good to the United States. But again, President Trump, it looks like, is doing this as a leverage play. It looks as though President Trump is pushing these tariffs specifically in order to get something out of Canada. That, by the way, was the take of Conrad Black, who's a journalist up in Canada. He said, what are you guys worried about? This is about shutting down the border, spending 3% on NATO defense. Get some concessions for Trump. It's a big win for him. He gets the victory. He chalks that up, and the tariffs go away. The Canadians, for their part, are getting very militant. Justin Trudeau, who is still titularly the Prime Minister of Canada, he announced retaliatory tariffs right away.
Tonight, I am announcing Canada will be responding to the U.S. trade action with 25% tariffs against $155 billion worth of American goods. This will include immediate tariffs on $30 billion worth of goods as of Tuesday, followed by further tariffs on $125 billion worth of American products in 21 days' time to allow Canadian companies and supply chains to seek to find alternatives.
Now, of course, the reality is that would hurt Canada more than it would hurt us. If they tariff American products, then they're taxing their own consumers. But this is what happens in a trade war. You increase your tariffs. The other countries that are being targeted increase their tariffs to retaliate because they say, okay, well, we're not going to let your goods in our market if you're not letting our goods in your market. And then if this sort of thing were to be carried out over a long period of time, it would be a real problem because China particularly is more than happy, just as with USAID going away, more than happy to fill that gap with cheap free trade with, say, Canada or Mexico or the Europeans. The Europeans, by the way, are already setting up for this. The Europeans are already anticipating that President Trump is going to try tariffing the Europeans. And so they've been creating more free trade agreements with themselves and presumably also with China. Okay, but when it comes to playing chicken, President Trump is very, very good at playing chicken. Mexico sending 10,000 troops to the border. Mexico pledging to stop the flow of fentanyl. right? These are big wins for President Trump. There's no other way to put it. Again, I've said this all along. When it comes to many of the things that Trump does, if you did them in a vacuum without trying to use them as leverage, there would be a major problem. And many of the things that Trump says in order to get those things done are things I disagree with. So, for example, you heard him railing against trade deficits. Okay, trade deficits are not a thing. A trade deficit is when you buy a thing from someone else and you gave them money and they gave you the good. You have a trade deficit with your grocery. If we buy a bunch of stuff from Vietnam, that doesn't mean that Vietnam has ripped us off in some way. The United States can still be the world's leading economy while having a giant trade deficit. And meanwhile, there are a bunch of poor countries that have trade surpluses. That's not the point. For President Trump, it's the effect of what he's attempting to do that matters. It is not what he says about the thing, apparently, that matters. So he gets a win out of the Mexicans. Presumably, he will get a win out of the Canadians as well. The United States throwing its weight around, particularly in the Western Hemisphere. I'd like to see what it looks like when the U.S. throws its weight around with regard to, say, China as well. We're doing a little bit with that 10% tariff on China. I'm hoping that one is more permanent. We'll get to more on this in a moment. First, did you know that American homeowners have over $32 trillion in equity? Criminals are targeting it with a growing scam the FBI calls house stealing. Scammers can transfer your title out of your name using a one-page document they file at the county. Then they can take out loans against it or even sell it behind your back. The most concerning part? You won't find out about it until collection or foreclosure notices start arriving in your mailbox, leaving you with a financial and legal nightmare. The best way to protect your equity is with Home Title Lock's exclusive $1 million triple lock protection. This service offers 24/7 monitoring, urgent alerts, and if fraud should occur, their U.S.-based restoration team will spend up to $1 million to fix the fraud and restore your title. Our own senior video editor, Adam, trusts them to protect his home. You should do the same. When was the last time you checked on your title? Well, never, which is exactly what scammers are counting on. The good news is we've partnered with Home Title Lock to offer you all 25% off their services. Go to HomeTitleLock.com. Use my promo code Shapiro25. Save 25%. You'll also get a free title history report to ensure you're not already a victim. Make sure you check out the $1 million triple lock protection details when you get there. Link below. That's HomeTitleLock.com. Promo code Shapiro25. HomeTitleLock.com. Promo code Shapiro25. All right, meanwhile, the DNC remains absolutely out in the wilderness. So the Democratic National Committee had to pick a next chair. Who did they pick? They picked a guy named Ken Martin. Ken Martin says that the Democratic Party is doing just fine. He, in fact, was the leader of the Democratic Party organization in Minnesota. He was a deputy to Tim Walz. Okay? And he basically said we did an amazing job. Kamala Harris was amazing. Tim Walz was amazing. He said the fight right now is against Donald Trump and the billionaires who bought this country. They have nothing. They have literally nothing. He said, quote, Donald Trump, the Republican Party, this is a new DNC. We're not going to sit back and not take you on when you fail the American people. But he had also said that there was nothing wrong with the party. Quote, we don't call it a postmortem or autopsy. Our party's not dead. It's still kicking, right? What we really need to do is get a handle around what happened last election cycle. We know we lost ground with Latino voters. We know we lost ground with women and younger voters and working class voters. We don't know the how and the why yet. Now, we kind of know, but you guys keep doing it. Here is some evidence for why that is, in fact, the case. So Jamie Harrison, who's the outgoing DNC chair, at one point they had to select the top committee at the DNC, and it has to be gender balanced according to the DNC. And so he announced that they didn't know what to do because they didn't have enough non-binary, gender queer people on their executive board. Good luck to the Dems, man. Wow.
Rules specify that when we have a gender non-binary candidate or officer, the non-binary individual is counted as neither male nor female, and the remaining 6 offices must be gender balanced. With the results of the previous 4 elections, our elected officers are currently 2 male and 2 female. In order to be gender balanced, we must elect 1 male, 1 female, and 1 person of any gender.
Man, and why are they losing? Amazing. Wow. Are you tired of the lies and the twist of the mainstream media talking points? Yeah, me too. Join me in my newest series, Fact, where I dismantle and bring truth to this tiring mainstream agenda.